Well, in one of my previous videos, I'll post the description down below. I explored the issue of kids going to school, especially diaspora kids, with a particular focus on kindergarten through 12th grade, and some of the implications for folks who are transitioning permanently. So in today's video, I'm going to switch the focus to talk about higher education, talking about education beyond high school. And I just want to warn you in advance, this video will get choppy at some point later on because I was getting help from my assistants who you're about to see. They were filming a good bit of it, so some of it may not be as pristine as I'd like it. So in my discussion about higher education, I'm going to speak first as a former international student. I came to the US on an F1 visa for students, then I transitioned to H1B, got a green card, and then eventually became a citizen. So I've got some experience living and working in the US as a foreign student. And then of course, I got my first degree in Kenya. And that also has implications for what I'm about to share in the next couple of minutes. Now, my talk about higher education too comes from my background as a scholar in higher education. Currently, I'm a tenured full professor at a university in California. And so higher education is not just something I'm familiar with, but it is something I do for work. Good morning and welcome to the village. We are still in the middle of Karating. What you're looking at is Maseno University. On the left is what we call college campus. And then on the right, where we are going to drive through, is Siriba campus. This is all still within Karating, which is a village located in Kisumu County in the western part of Kenya. Welcome back to our channel. We talk about all things that influence lives of people who are transitioning back to the village, mostly from diaspora, but a lot of what we share too has implications for people moving from the city to the village. So if you're watching our channel for the first time, I hope this content is going to be useful enough for you to subscribe. But even if you don't subscribe, I'm still really glad that you're spending your time with us. So as I talk through this video, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to walk you through this amazing place called Maseno University, which again is where I got my bachelor's. So right now we're driving through the main highway between the main campus and Siriba campus. And I remember spending 4 years of my life walking back and forth on this street. Some of the best years of my life. So anyway, this conversation is going to be useful for parents who are thinking about whether or not they need to send their kids back to Kenya for school, whether for K-12 or for college. And this is also going to be useful for parents who have diaspora kids learning in Kenya, and they're wondering whether going to school in Kenya has implications as to whether their kids can actually go back to the US colleges. And then lastly, this discussion may be useful for young people who are thinking about moving from Kenya to US universities. So let's start with some background about Kenyan higher education and why it may or may not work for your kid. So I also want to warn you again that some of the information I'm going to share may be a little dated because it's been a while since I was a student at a Kenyan university. And so in general though, Kenya has lots of public and private universities all over the country. When I was a student, we had about maybe 5 or 6 public universities, but now there's a lot of them out there. And many of them are highly regarded, both Kenya and internationally. They have lots of degree options, and over the years, they've really produced some stellar scholars around the world. One thing I love about Kenyan universities in general is that students often have a very vibrant social life. In fact, on the right is what we would call Millennial Hall, and that was one of the main halls where we would attend classes as education student. And as you move further, there's this massive amphitheater made of forests, and there was this little street that if you look in where that white car is just turning around, there's a small pathway that goes down that street, and we love just walking down that pathway. And so these universities often have very vibrant social life for students, and just gives kids opportunities to become adults. Some of our universities have really good amenities, especially private universities. The public ones, you get a mix of experiences, and most of them are located in places where the weather is excellent. Maseno weather is about as good as it gets in Kenya. It doesn't get too hot, it doesn't get too cold. Very nice weather almost throughout the year. So this is the middle of summer. There's not a whole lot going on, and that's why you see it doesn't look as busy. But when you come to this place during regular times, it's very busy. Now, besides all the many good things that I may not be able to talk about today, there are some challenges for sure. For one, Kenya universities are well known for the issue of nepotism and tribalism, where university leadership is highly influenced by the tribal location where the university is. This is Maseno in Luoland, and so top leadership most likely will be Luos. If you go to Rift Valley universities, you'll find top leadership coming from the same area, and that comes with its own sets of challenges. Then the question of quality control remains a major problem. Some courses are not so good, some programs have issues. I've had cases where people enroll in programs, complete 4 years, only to find out that their programs are not accredited. So quality control is still a major issue in many Kenyan universities. Lack of maintenance, as you can see right now, the road simply disappears at this point. From here on, it's purely dirt road, and this used to be a tarmac road years ago. So the culture of maintenance is still relatively foreign in many public universities. And then for me, the biggest issue is the concern around instructors having unchecked power, often over grades and relationships and things like that. And so it's not uncommon to find cases where the instructor loses exam results, and then the student has to bear the brunt of such problems. In some cases, you have a few really terrible instructors who are sexual predators, who do their thing and often get away with it. And so I'm really bothered by the unchecked power that many instructors have in Kenya. In many cases, academic writing doesn't seem to be a big deal, and so lots of students who graduate from Kenyan universities are not often very strong writers. So writing skills is not something that I don't think they put in a lot of work, at least at the time I was a student. Same thing with critical thinking. So a lot of what we did was rote learning, and a lot of taking notes and regurgitating whatever it is that you have been told in class. And of course, in Kenyan universities, I have not seen multiple choice exams, which is a good thing, but it was a major shocker for me when I moved to the US. And then, of course, the grading curve, where essentially an A begins at 70, but that can change quite a bit. So for me, when I moved to the US and then I was told that an A starts at a 90, I thought I was screwed, because I thought it's very difficult to get a 90, as it was in Kenyan universities. The grading using a curve can be a problem, especially for kids who have grown in diaspora. And then, of course, access to technology can be limited depending on the university you're in. I remember we didn't have internet. If we did, it was very minimal. And just basic technology that you can expect in classes, there was issues around that. And then minimal student support when it comes to healthcare, counseling, food options for under-resourced students. Housing is a major headache, because our universities admit a lot of students, but they barely have housing options for students, and so housing was always a major thing. Now, the other big problem for me is the question of inaccessibility for people with disabilities. Public universities in Kenya are generally not designed for people with disabilities, whether you're talking about the curriculum or physical access, lack of ramps, lack of elevators, and things that are designed to work for people with disabilities. Most public universities are not accessible, at least in the ways that you would expect. So let's switch back to US universities. And today I'm just going to highlight things that are relevant to graduate school. I will do a separate video talking about undergraduate, but today let's focus on graduate school. For one, many US universities are really beautiful. A long time ago, I would look at the brochures and I thought it was just cleaned up pictures. The truth is, many of our universities are very beautiful, the way they are well designed and all kinds of aesthetic features. A lot of them have excellent programs. And it's no secret that some of the world's top universities are located in the US, with really good training models, lots of research options, and of course, a lot of them are well resourced in terms of number of instructors, small class sizes, technology, funding. And so, like in my case where I teach, we have quite a few smart classrooms. If you don't know what that is, I encourage you to look it up. And then the one thing I love about US universities in general is that there are many systems that work. Now, that is not to say that everything works. There's lots of things that do not work and I would not want to see in Kenya. But there are many systems that work. For example, disability support. There's a lot of curriculum supports, physical access supports that make it very easy for people with all kinds of disabilities to access higher education, including children with intellectual disabilities. There are specific programs in US universities that admit young people with intellectual disabilities. And so I think there are many systems that work. And if things go wrong, whether it's grades, whether you experience racism, there are systems designed to help students if they are used properly. And so there are several protections that are put in place to prevent things from going wrong. And then, of course, there are lots of resources for minority students, extracurricular activity, student housing, gym, pools, and all the other stuff. But of course, amidst all of that, there are problems. Number one is racism. Racism is a massive problem in US universities. And I'm not just talking about the obvious racism where somebody discriminates against you because of your color directly, but the subtle ways that kids are going to be terrorized. Racism in American universities are terrible. I've seen this especially in medical courses. Nursing, medicine, PA. Racism is beyond incredible. And then the issue of safety. Lots of shootings in US universities where somebody just comes in with a gun, starts shooting random people. And then the issue of cultural disconnect, where our kids really struggle to connect with the white instructors who often teach. And so many instructors sometimes, because of the difference in culture, accent, they often misinterpret a lot of things they see in our kids. For example, the quiet ones are thought to be not so smart. And with all of that comes with lots of loneliness for our students. And then the expectations that they have of our students can be very different. For example, they expect our kids to be actively participating in classes. Those of us who come from Africa come as passive learners. And so active participation is something that we struggle with in the initial sense. And then, of course, US universities are so expensive. That we can talk about on a different video. And then, of course, the weather. Depending on where you are, some schools are in very cold places that may not be fun to stay in. And so, like I said, like every other place, there are many good things about US universities, but there are specific challenges that will be a barrier to diaspora kids. So what does all of this mean? Number one, I often recommend that if your kid is born and raised in Kenya, it's okay to do undergraduate in Kenya. They'll just be fine. Graduate school, I would highly recommend US universities as opposed to Kenyan graduate school. We'll discuss that in a future video. If your child has a disability, by all means send them to US university if you can, because there are tons of supports for them. And be sure to link up with folks who have gone to school in the US, because there's so many things you may not know about as a first generation college student. So link up with people who have been through US systems and know how to navigate that world. Now, if you're raised in the US, I highly recommend, especially older kids, if they can, let them do a study abroad program in Kenya. They will have a fantastic time. That is often a good opportunity, particularly when they're still undergrads. But if they're born in the US, I would still recommend that they go through Kenyan schools first before they go straight to a Kenyan university. Because otherwise, the culture shock may be very tough for kids born and raised in diaspora. And of course, there's lots of scholarships within US universities. You just have to know what to do to get them and how to navigate that world as well. And in general, state schools and community colleges are far cheaper with just as good forms of education. So when you can, it's okay to send your kid to a state college, especially if they don't get a scholarship into some of these high-end universities. State schools work just fine, particularly for kids who are paying in-state tuition. And then most importantly, Any kid thinking about being successful in the US must learn self advocacy. In the US, if you cannot advocate for yourself, life is going to be very difficult for you. So teach kids self advocacy both for school and even for work. I hope this was useful, and I will see you in the next. Thank you.